Alright, so way back in 2017, the sequel for The Evil Within released, and The Evil Within, if you didn't know, is a survival horror game developed by Tango Gameworks, who have now changed into ZeniMax, I believe, and published by Bethesda. And what's so impactful about the first game specifically is the director of the game and the creator of the game was Shinji Mikami, I think that's his name. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but he's the director for the first few Resident Evil games, so he's the creator, basically. You know, he made the first game way back in the 90s, and you know, the series has grown massively since then, so he's kind of the one that started it all. The first game was incredible. I really enjoyed the first game, and the second one as well is very good. Some would say the first one's better, some would say the second one's better. It's always a mixed conversation, but both games, unfortunately, did kind of slip under the radar a little bit, more so the second one than the first one. And we're going to talk about why that is, and then kind of go into what happens in Evil Within 2, why it's different to the first one, and just general kind of looking at the gameplay and story and stuff. So, let's get started. First things first, let's go into why it may have gone under the radar a little bit. Two big things happened to kind of cause this. One was this shared the same year release as Resident Evil 7, which, as we all know, kind of was the game that saved the series, because after 6 there was a lot of concern, so they kind of stepped away and made 7 and released it in 2017, and it exploded. Resident Evil 7 is now the highest selling game in the franchise, period, so it's definitely a big deal. And this game shared the same year as Resident Evil 7. They were fairly spaced out. I believe Resident Evil 7 came out in January of 2017, and Evil Within 2 came out in October, but releasing a game in October is a bold decision, because if you play games, you'll know that the big releases usually happen around October, November time. You know, the Call of Duty games, the Battlefields, if there is one, any main AA games, AAA games come out in October, November, so this did kind of slip under the radar a little bit for most people, because these bigger releases were kind of taking the limelight, I would probably say. That's the reason why it didn't kind of do as well. The game also didn't sell as well as the original for usual sequel reasons. It just depends how people felt about the first game and when they make a second one. And the timing of it all, there was a lot of factors involved with why the game didn't do so well in terms of sales. But the game itself, Evil Within 2, I think is such, I won't say an improvement, but it's definitely built upon the first game a lot more in terms of gameplay and story. It's definitely a sequel, like it definitely continues the story, and it just adds a lot of new things you can do and new gameplay experiences you can do, and I want to kind of throw those out there now. So let's actually talk about the Evil Within 2 and how good I think it was. Okay, so survival horror game, right? You have limited inventory. There's not a lot of ammo in the Evil Within 2 and Evil Within. Sometimes in the Evil Within, especially the first game, there were points where it was actually a struggle if you didn't save your bullets. They kept some of the same systems from the original game, like the matches system, I believe, still in this one. Essentially what that means is, remember in Resident Evil 1, where if you kill a zombie and it went down, it would come back? I believe that was the same thing in this game, and essentially you would light on fire to stop it from respawning permanently. Same kind of premise here as well, and you would get bonus kind of upgrade gel in this game as well if you burn them, as well as maybe some extra bullets or something like that. So you can use them to gather resources as well as making things easier later down the line. The game has a decent array of weapons. You know, you got your usual pistols and shotguns. There's a crossbow, which is pretty cool. I believe it's called the Agony Bolt or the Agony Crossbow or something like that. Very cool. Definitely improved upon it in the second game. It has a lot more utility in the second game. As well as a decent amount of melee weapons you can pick up and use. They are kind of limited use things, because in the first game, I can remember quite well, you could find like an axe or a piece of wood, and it would do a lot of damage, but it would break quite quickly. So they were always useful, and again, it did save bullets, so it's always kind of handy to have those lying around. Speaking of kind of saving ammo and stuff like that, the game has a pretty impressive sneaking system. As you can imagine, that's exactly what it sounds like. You can sneak up on enemies and kind of execute them from behind. Normal enemy types anyway, not like bosses and stuff, but normal random enemies. You can sneak kill, and again saves bullets, it's one hit and they're down. So there's a lot of ways to deal with situations in this game and the first game, whether it's going all guns blazing, which is always a risk, sneaking as best as possible, taking out as many things as you can before you get seen, or maybe even clearing an area completely unnoticed, or using the crossbow and crafting bolts for it, or using materials you find throughout the map and throughout the levels. One other thing the second game added that wasn't present in the first game was a kind of open world. You have like a hub area, it's a town in the STEM system. You can kind of freely explore it, and there's side things you can do, little side quests that pop up, random things that happen throughout the town. There is open world elements, which is pretty cool, and again, that gives you an opportunity to find new weapons, or find new upgrades, or find extra materials and stuff like that. It's encouraged to explore, it's always encouraged to explore in a survival horror game, and this is definitely no different. Like, it wants you to go and find these additional places to get more stuff to help you later on in the game, because boss fights in the Evil Within, I would say, are a little bit better than the ones in Resident Evil. Resident Evil bosses are usually quite simple, and usually not too difficult to beat. But even on like normal difficulties in the Evil Within and Evil Within 2, the bosses can be a bit of a pain to deal with. One thing they added later on to the Evil Within 2, which is something I've kind of briefly mentioned in the Resident Evil video a couple days ago, just kind of, it does kind of relate to that a little bit, is they added a first-person perspective mode to this game. Now all the rumours at the minute are kind of circulating that Village is getting a first-person mode, a third-person mode. I think it makes sense to have a third-person game built and add a first-person perspective rather than doing it the other way around, because the game's already kind of built for more open encounters and stuff like that, so having the first-person mode in a third-person game makes sense, but the other way around kind of might be a little bit difficult depending on how the game's been made. But they added that later on, I believe quite a bit after launch. They had the first-person mode, and it's a lot of fun. I remember it being pretty fun to do, and it definitely does, again, add a whole different kind of immersion layer, and kind of makes some scarier encounters in the game a bit more terrifying. Now, one thing I always like in a survival horror game is the variation of difficulties you can get in a game. Obviously there's your normal, easy, and hard, and then some games have like a super easy or a super hard, or both. You know, look at Resident Evil 7, for example, again. You have casual, which is pretty easy, normal, which in 7 is kind of fair, and then Madhouse, which is ridiculous. The Evil Within 1 and 2 have a mode called Akuma mode, I believe, and that's like the hardest in the game, and it's a one-hit mode. Like, whatever hits you, even if it's a normal enemy, or a little bit of damage off some environment, you're one shot. You're dead in one hit, regardless of what it is. That mode requires you to know the game like the back of your hand. You need to know what's coming, you need to know how to deal with certain encounters that happen. It's not recommended to just jump into that mode, and I've tried the Akuma mode in the first game. I think I got like a quarter of the way through, and I just couldn't carry on. I didn't have the ammo, I didn't have the... It was a long time ago. You know, I can look down at my desk now and see like the special edition of the first game sitting there. I do want to make more content on the first game and second game in the future, so look forward to that in the new year. But I like hard difficulties in games like this. You know, I've played all manner of hard difficulties. I've played Village of Shadows, which I wouldn't really consider difficult, but it's there. I've played Madhouse, I've played, you know, the Invisible Enemy mode, the first game, which is fun. Hardcore in 2, Inferno in 3, Professional in 4 and 5, like, they're all so much more fun, because it adds like that whole other layer of this is fucking hard, and you need to save your bullets, because you're going to go down pretty quickly if you don't, like, pay attention to what you're doing. And that mode in this, the Akuma mode, it does not mess around, it's hard. In terms of story of this game, I don't particularly remember what it is. I know it's essentially a continuation of the first game. You are kind of back into the STEM system, which is like this... I don't really know how to explain it. The story for me is kind of a blur. I definitely know it's a good story, but essentially the story of the second game is Sebastian is needed to go into the STEM for whatever reason, and his daughter is in there, trapped in there, I believe, and he's going in there to get her out, basically. I think that's the gist of it. Could be wrong, but I think that's kind of the overlaying story, that his daughter's stuck in there and he's trying to get her out. So that's the story as far as I can remember. The first game story is a bit more fresh in my mind. I think I've played the first game more than the second game. and that whole Ruvik being in his mind the entire time. It's very mind-bending, it's very twisty, the story for the first game, and I'm pretty sure the second one is too. Like, some of the shit you see and what happens is pretty crazy, so it's very interesting. But yeah, that's essentially The Evil Within 2. Very underrated game in my opinion. I really like both games. A third game, we don't know 100% if it's a thing. Obviously with the Microsoft kind of owning Bethesda now, I believe it would probably be Xbox exclusive and PC, probably through Game Pass. But we know that the studio is making a game right now. We just don't know what it is. So it could be The Evil Within 3, it could be something different. There is potential that it's not because the sales did go down on the second game, which is a shame. But we'll see what happens. But either way, let me know your thoughts on The Evil Within and The Evil Within 2 in the comments. Do you like it? Do you never played it? Have you played it? Who knows? Always interested to know. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.